I'm very happy to be able to share this testimony, and I thank you, Kim, for the opportunity. My sister passed away when she was 16 years old, and she would have been 37 years old today. Thank you. Thank you, Sister Steph. And she and I were as close as Jessie Ray and Layla are. Just a 2-year gap between us. And so we were like best friends, and we also could fight up a storm because we were in each other's space all the time, but we loved one another. And when Elthea was 3 years old, she had developed chronic asthma. And Elthea was the one between the two of us who enjoyed sport and enjoyed being active, but she was so restricted by her health condition. And she always felt that it was unfair, that I could do sport, but I didn't choose to. And here she loved playing soccer, and she was quite a tomboy when we were growing up, and she couldn't do any of that because of her health condition. One day, Elthea was 14 years old, and she had a bad asthma attack at school again. But to me, this wasn't anything new, because I'd seen Elthea struggling through the years, going to hospital, staying overnight with my mum. I'd seen the impact of the condition on our family. I mean, it really drained my mother, and it took a lot out of her. And it affected all of us. And then one day after school, she had an extremely tight chest. It was probably her worst asthma attack ever. And she said to me, "Veronique, will you please come to the hospital with me?" And I said, "Elthea, you know I don't enjoy going to the hospital, so I'll be at home, I'll be praying for you, but I'm not coming along." And my mum took her in. And at about 3:45, I looked at the clock, and I was studying for my matric exam. And suddenly I had this strange feeling and this impression in my heart that something wasn't right. And I prayed and I said, "Lord, Elthea is too young to die. Please spare her life, don't let her die." And there my brothers were, as well, and Nathaniel, jumping on my mum's bed, and I was sitting next to the bed, looking at the time and praying. Meanwhile, in the hospital, my mum was there with Elthea in the ICU, and they told me that they tried to calm her down and to relax her and to get her to lie down, and she just said, "No, I can't lie down, I'm going to die." Because she just felt like if she surrenders to resting, she's going to leave her body, and she didn't want that. And there was a lot of panic because they couldn't stabilize her. And my mum says she just felt a tap on her shoulder, and she looked and there was nobody, but then she felt a hand on her back leading her out of the ICU. And she was in a daze, and she just went home. An hour or so after that, the doctors phoned, and they said to my mum, "You and your husband must please come to the hospital right now." And when they got there, they saw Elthea with a mask on her face, ECG. They were busy doing tests, and there was a lot of chaos in that ward. And Elthea was taking off the mask, saying, "I've seen Jesus. I need to tell you that I've seen the Lord." And she's all excited, and they are concerned because they know the condition she came in just about 2 hours before that. And here this child is glowing and shining with the glory of the Lord. The eczema on her face is gone. And she's so happy. But then she explains what happened. She says, when they eventually got her to lie down and they administered the medication, she heard the ECG machine making a beeping noise and her heart flatlining. And she saw a spirit leaving her body. She saw herself lying there. And she just started to ascend out of her body all the time. She saw her skin looking really dark. She saw the doctors panicking. She heard one of the doctors saying, "You administered too much Atrovin." And so there was a mistake. That's what she heard as she left. And then as she became distracted, because she said, all of this was happening down here, but I was floating up and up and up to the ceiling until I wasn't interested in what was happening down there anymore. And I thought to myself, "Oh my goodness, I'm going straight to hell." Those were her first thoughts. And then a strong hand grabbed hold of hers and said, "Never doubt your salvation." Because Elthea had been saved. I mean, the two of us, we'd grown up in the church. But right before Elthea had died, she had she just became so disillusioned and so angry about the fact that she'd been suffering for all these years with this condition. And she had just come to the end of it, really, because lots of people had prayed for her. I mean, I remember when I was little, there was this call-in show on the Christian radio station where people would, Positive Proof was the name of the show. And then this evangelist or this healing evangelist would pray for people and there would be healing. And there would be testimonies. And my parents phoned in and they prayed for Elthea. We had our youth pastor coming to the house, Mark. And he prayed for her. And we never ever saw a positive result. And we could never understand that because all the remedies and all the prayers and all the fasting, and Elthea continued to struggle. But what I realize now is that God's plan is so much infinitely bigger than ours. And amidst all of that, He knows exactly what He is doing. So just because He doesn't answer our prayers the way we expect Him to or want Him to, doesn't mean that He's not present. He's always there. And He knows exactly what He's doing. Is a lesson I've taken away from that. And then she says, as His hand grabs hold of us and says to her, don't ever doubt your salvation. She says a peace comes over her, almost tangible, like more tangible than an object. And she says, overwhelming love, peace, and security just washed over her. And she said, there aren't any words in this realm to adequately express what that is. She said it's like a tangible. It's something you can touch. Peace, you can touch it. You can touch love. You can touch joy. You can touch security. Like here it's abstracts in the earthly realm, but in the heavenly realm, these are things you can almost see because you can feel it. So I'm trying to best describe how she conveyed it to us. But I don't think I think our minds are too finite to grasp such a concept. And then she looked at, when she looked into this man's face and he had hold of her right hand and she gripped his hand, and from the moment she left her body, he was holding her hand. And she just looked at him and she said, and of course all of us are just interested in what does Jesus look like? Because she said she knew instinctively, he didn't have to tell her that he was Jesus. She knew it was him. She said everything about him is alive, even his hair. And she said his eyes are like a color she'd never seen, but if she could explain, it's like water, like living water. It's alive. And you know his eyes are so piercing, they look straight through you, into your heart, into your thoughts. But there's nothing but love there. There's no judgment, there's no condemnation. Just so much love. And then she thought to herself, oh no, my sin. And Jesus said to her, I know all about your sin. I know everything about you, Elthea. And I love you. I know everything about you. Because she thought, what about my sin and what about my... And she's thinking all these things and he's speaking to her thoughts. She didn't, and she was shocked because she didn't say it out loud, but he heard her thinking it, and then he answered that. And then she said there was this, he took her down this green path in this beautiful green grass. And there was a bright light in the distance. And from that light, she saw this man running towards her. And it was somebody who we'd loved so dearly, an elder in our church, who had passed away 3 months before that. And he said, Elthea, it's so good to see you. Are you staying? She says, of course I'm staying. I'm never going back. I'm never going back. Of course I'm staying. He says, if you go back, tell my wife I'll see her soon. And Elthea was thinking, there's no way I'm giving up any of this. I'm going to stay here. This is what I've always wanted. I'm staying. Because for the first time in her life, she felt completely well and healthy and no weight in her chest. And she said that love, security, and peace was something she wasn't going to trade for anything. And then Jesus said, before you make up your mind, I want to show you something. And she was surprised that she was going to get a choice. And he took her down this path. And at the end of the path was this enormous glass or mirror that was split into 3. And in the first half, in the first third of that mirror, she saw my mum's sad face and my grandma praying for her. She saw me praying for her in my mum's room. And then she saw my brothers jumping on the bed. And this is at 3:45, when all of this is happening. And she saw into time exactly what was happening at the time. So I think God allowed that to happen to give us a witness that this actually happened. Because there's no way she could have seen me praying and my brothers jumping on the bed there, my grandparents praying and my mum sad countenance. She saw all of that and it was actually happening at that moment. But she said Jesus took his finger and he zoomed out Tazwell, my brother, the one born after me, his face, and circled it as he zoomed it out. And he said, you and Tazwell fight a lot, eh? And she said, yes, we do. And then Jesus laughs and says, and he's a real terror, but you love him the most. And she stood still and she thought about it. She thought, I really do love Tazwell. And the two of them would fight from dawn till dusk. They were just fighting all the time. But she did love him dearly. But then she saw Nathaniel, who was still a baby, like a toddler at the time. And she said, oh no, Jesus, I've got to go back for Nathaniel. And Nathaniel's the one who looks and sounds like her. She said, I can't stay here. I have to go back. There's a lot of things I need to teach him and show him. I think I'll go back. And then he said to her, but there's one more thing I need to show you before I send you back. So he takes her to this big book. And she's thinking, oh, my sin is in that book. The entire book is full from cover to cover. There's no more pages left, and there's this black inscription in there. And Jesus takes a new page. She said it was this big white page he was putting into this big white book. And he said, this is a new beginning. I want you to start at the beginning of this page. Tell everybody you meet about your encounter with me. Tell everyone that I'm coming soon. And Elthea said, and then Jesus said, he said to her, I'm going to see you soon. And she said, no, Jesus, not soon. I've got too much to do. I've got too many places to go and too many people to speak to. Not soon. And all he did was smile at her. And then he blew into her face. And as he blew into her face, she said she felt that a strong gush of air coming in and then stopping and working over here in her chest. And that was where she had a hernia. They were going to operate on her that same year because it was like a third breast almost. It was so pronounced, and it was because of all the pressure from all the attacks she would get. She developed this thing here, and they said she'd probably have to recuperate for a year after the op. She felt it working here, and then she felt it shooting to the bottom of her feet, and as it came down to her feet, she found herself back in her body. And there the doctors were trying to pry open her right hand that Jesus was holding. Because this is a child that's been dead now for 5.5 minutes. But her hand is clenched tight, and they can't understand why her hand is clenched tightly if she's dead, and they can't get it open. And she said the entire time she was with him, he held her hand tightly. It was only when she came back to her body that she opened her hand. And then she was explaining this to the doctors who were trying to calm her down. They couldn't understand how the hernia had disappeared. And even her blood type was a mystery to them. And then they had before and after x-rays of her lungs and her heart. I mean, her lungs were enlarged, her heart was compressed, but she came back with a perfect heart and perfect lungs. And one of the things Elthea said to Jesus when she was in his presence was, why didn't you heal me? So many people prayed for me, and you never healed me. And he said to her, I know Mark prayed for you, the youth pastor. And he could never get over the fact that Jesus knew his name, but he's a youth pastor. And I mean, so it just shows how often we say things, but we're not really convinced in our own hearts that he knows our names, he knows us. And he said, yes, I know Mark prayed for you, but this was my plan and my purpose for you to see eternity, so that you can go back and win others for me. I was there every time anybody ever prayed for you. I was there all the time. And that transformed my thinking. You know, we don't always get what we ask God for immediately, and we want to get upset when God takes his time with us. But in the bigger scheme of things, there's a much bigger plan than just our healing, than just, you know, getting us out of a fix. God knows what he's doing, and we've got to trust his plan. And she said, and what about the doctors who gave me the wrong medication? And Jesus said, don't go back and blame the doctors. That was part of my plan. How else would you have come here? It was a vehicle to get her into his presence. So there are no mistakes, there are no coincidences. There's only a divine supernatural plan. And all of us, our minds were boggled because I was always the goody two-shoes in the family. Surely if God was going to give anyone that encounter, it was going to be me. I couldn't believe it, like Elthea. Elthea was contemplating my death at one point because I was, she was so angry because of how healthy I was. One day she stood in front of my bed with a brick to like smack me with it. Thankfully I woke up before she'd executed the plan. But I mean, it had become that strained before Jesus took her away. So much so that she felt completely unqualified to have had that encounter. But God turned her life around. She was 16 years old, and God had used her. Even in that hospital, in that moment, there was so much chaos there. The doctors were beside themselves. He was a Muslim doctor who cried and cried and cried because she had witnessed the whole thing. And she actually said to Elthea, I need to go home. I'm not even sure of my own religion. One of the professors brought his family in and said, this is the girl that died, and came back with the story. I mean, Elthea started praying for people almost immediately in the hospital, laying hands on a quadriplegic that was in the ward next to hers, who had come over the border illegally, and she had collapsed and she couldn't walk, she couldn't use her limbs. And she was on a drip and they were feeding her intravenously, but then Elthea prayed for her, and this woman the next morning was out of the bed eating chocolate cake. So there was so much of the glory. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I saw her. She looked like someone else. She was shining with the glory of the Lord because she'd been in his presence and she'd seen him. And there she was praying, and the one doctor even joked and said, this hospital's going to be empty if you keep this up. She prayed for everybody, and then there's a woman who she prayed for who was barren. Couldn't have children for many, many years. And this woman had conceived and had a child and named the child Elthea. And she's like, what, 20 today, 20 odd years old today? Yeah, she's 20 years old today. And I mean, so much good came from Elthea's testimony, and so many people got saved. And although she was young, she accomplished more than most people accomplish in a lifetime in those 2 years. And I mean, it was about the 1st of October when Elthea had that encounter. And exactly 2 years after that, she came home from school one day and she was completely distressed. And my mom said, what is wrong? I can see you've been crying. And she said, Jesus came to me in my classroom today. So my mom said, but why are you sad? Isn't that a good thing? She said, he stood next to my desk and he said to me, complete the work. None of us got that, and why that had affected us so. But when we thought about it afterwards, we said, if Jesus said to her, complete the work, it meant finish your assignment. I'm coming to fetch you. That's what it meant, and she knew that she had to leave us. And then from that day forward, we noticed a change in her. She started keeping a journal, very strict diary of how she would spend her time. She spent more time than usual reading the Word and just being quiet. And she wasn't the same as she prepared, and then she started giving away her things. She had some new dresses, said to me, I'd like you to have this, gave me her jewelry, wrote a note for her best friend. She was doing all of these things, and it didn't occur to me that this child is preparing to go. But she did say to me, I am tired now, Veronique, and I just want to go back. And I got so angry with her. I said, but you have a second chance at living. I cannot believe you are saying this to me. I got so emotional about it, and she never spoke about it again. And all she said to my mom was, when I die, I want happy colors at my funeral. I don't want any mourning and grieving. I know you'll be sad for a while, but now you know where I'm going because you've heard about the place. You know. I'm not dead. I'm not in the ground. I'm with Jesus. I'm just going back there. And please don't be sad for long. And she even told me what song she wanted me to sing at the funeral. And I thought, I mean, I wasn't taking any of that seriously. I wouldn't accept that she's going to die. And there she was planning a funeral. And then It was only a few weeks after that when Althea then decided she wanted to help my mum make lunch and made the sweetest pudding ever. And because she wasn't one that ever cooked, but that particular Sunday, the following day, the Monday, I came back from varsity. I was excited about sharing my day with her. She was just lying on the couch and listening to the same song over and over again. I'm going to a city where there'll be no more night. I'm going to a city where Jesus is the light, was the lyrics of the one song. And the other song was, it will be worth it all when we see Jesus. Just to hear him say, well done, will be worth any price. And my mother was distressed and she said, you know, Althea's been lying on that couch all day. She's been rewinding this tape and playing it and rewinding the same songs over and over. Something's not right. And I said to her, Mommy, I've just been in the lounge now. I saw Althea. I don't think anything's wrong. I think she's fine. And my mother just could find no peace because she had this strange feeling that something was not quite right, that, you know, something's going to happen. And eventually, she said Elthea was staring into the mirror. And she was calling and she wasn't with my mom. And my mom could see and feel her hands and feet were getting cold. And then she said, I'm taking you to the doctor now. She said, why, Mommy? She said, no, I'm taking you to the doctor because something's not right. They took her. I hugged her and I said I loved her as she left the door, not knowing it was the last time I was going to see her. They took her to the doctor. My mom said, everyone in the family's had a flu and a chest infection. I just want you to look at her. I think that she's not well. And then the doctor started examining her, but then suddenly Elthea said, I want my dad. I want my dad now. And the doctor said, you're a big girl, you can't carry on like this. And she said, no, I want my daddy now. My mom had to call my dad. And he didn't want to because he was in his overalls, all greasy and everything. He's like, what is this child doing? Why do I have to come in? No, she wants you and she doesn't want to hear anything. So my dad goes in and he rubs her back and she smiles and she looks at him. And suddenly she turns her head and she says, Jesus. And she dies right there. And the poor doctor didn't even think of trying to resuscitate her because he didn't understand what was going on. He did none of what is routine when somebody is not breathing, because he didn't understand what was going on. He grabbed her, he put her in his car, took her to the hospital. She was already gone. And then they put her onto a life support system. And of course, my parents were beside themselves when this happened because it was so sudden. I mean, if it was serious, they would have taken her to the hospital. They took her to the local GP. And what everybody was thinking was if God could resurrect her once, he was able to do it again. And we had the entire church praying. Hundreds of people were praying for Elthea. And my aunt had a vision on her way to the hospital. Elthea came and spoke to her and said to her, Auntie Lynette, please tell them to stop praying. I'm not coming back. And one of the old mothers in the church also saw Elthea in a vision, and she saw a great procession in heaven, like someone important was being welcomed in. My boy. And she said there was great rejoicing in heaven. As Elthea entered in. And they were applauding her. As they had welcomed her in because she had done all that God had required. And that she had finished her work here. And so we knew that she's not going to come back. But what the strange thing that had happened was, in hospital while we were all praying and all this was going on, two people had this vision. Elthea was dead, and I mean, she had not received oxygen to her brain. And her vitals started picking up, her heart started beating on its own, and she started breathing on her own, and the doctors couldn't understand it because there was no way she was supposed to come back from that. I mean, it was just too long, and it was during the time when colors started coming back to her face. And when she started breathing and her heart started beating on its own, independent, it could do all of this function without the machines, that she came and said, tell them to stop praying. Because she knew that our prayers could place a demand on God to send her back. And especially because there was so much agreement and unity about praying for her to come back, she actually intervened and said, please tell them to stop. I've completed my work and I'm not coming back. And Althea's life forever changed my perspective on life and on eternity, and I understand that this is so brief, the span of our life. Even if you live to 120, it's still brief compared to forever. And we have to do all that we can in terms of accomplishing our purpose and just doing what it is that God tells us to do. And because He's not interested in outward appearances and things that impress people don't really impress God. He's just interested in our hearts, and that we have our hearts surrendered to Him completely and to His will. That's something I've learned from Elthea, and I hope that in my lifetime I will be able to accomplish my purpose so that I can get a time for a welcome when I get into His presence, that I know that He would say to me, well done, my good and faithful servant. And although she's been gone for 21 years, it's like it happened yesterday. It's still so fresh in my mind because, I mean, the story never gets old because it's still so relevant even today, and it still changes the hearts and lives of people. And I hope that somehow the story of her life impacted yours to a measure where you'll be enlightened, and also that your eyes would be open to your own purpose. Because I'm reminded of the scripture that says, all the days ordained for me were written in His book of days before one of them came to be. So your life is a well thought out plan, and never ever underestimate that or think that you don't have a purpose or what contribution can you make. Every single one of us, He has a plan for us, and it's beyond our own comprehension if we would just surrender our lives to Him. Thanks.